xxxxxxxx, and welcome to episode 118. Tonight on Book Chat, I'm interviewing author Susan Sey. Susan was a software trainer with nice clothes and free time, but now she has kids. She lives with them and her incredibly patient husband in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she produces smart, sexy, contemporary romance. She loves ice cream and her family and happy endings, though necessarily not in that order. Tonight, I'll be chatting with Susan about her writing, Rust City, and more. Tonight concludes my Rust City 2017 series, where I've been exclusively chatting with some of the authors that will be in attendance at Rust City BookCon here locally here in Michigan this August 4th through 6th. For those of you that want to know more, I have a link below in the show notes, or you can go to rustcitybookcon.com. Tickets are still available. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and share it. Show your support by rating the podcast and leaving a positive review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. The podcast can also be found on the Spreaker app, YouTube, Google Play Music, the Stitcher app, and more. If you'd like to email in feedback or questions, feel free to reach out to me at info@shelfaddiction.com or call in and leave an internet voice message on SpeakPipe. I look forward to hearing from you. The link is below in the show notes. Hey, Susan. What is this? Wednesday. We'll call it Wednesday. Yes, it's Wednesday. How are you this evening?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So, is it as hot as it is here where you are?
It is. I am in Omaha, which is like my third city of the last 2 weeks, and it has been 95 degrees every day. We're dying over here.
Oh my goodness. Yes, I understand. I relate. While it's not 95, it feels like it because it's so humid here. So it's just been dreadful.
Yeah.
So if you're ready, we can just jump on in. You ready to get this started?
Let's do it.
Okay. So let's start with what you're reading right now. Tell me about what's on your nightstand.
Oh my goodness. Well, I was in a big rereading kick for a while, and I was just starting to tackle Stephen King's The Dark Tower series again, The Last Gunslinger, because, that's coming out as a movie, and Idris Elba is going to be the Man in Black, so I kind of have to reread the whole thing so I can be prepared for that, because I'm excited.
That's awesome. I did see that preview or some snippets about it. That looks really good.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I just can't believe that it's actually happening. But I'm a little wary too, because, Stephen King, his stuff sometimes doesn't translate to the screen really well. So I really hope they don't screw this up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're doing some other things of his right now. Are you watching any of that stuff? Like, I think there's The Mist that's on TV now.
You know what? I haven't gotten to that one yet, but I was just in Colorado. Remember, I said I've been like multiple cities recently. And I toured the Overlook Hotel, which is the one that Stephen King stayed in, and he had a bad dream. And like 3 or 4 hours later, he had the entire book for The Shining in his head. And he hated that movie because Stanley Kubrick, he says, ruined it. So just recently, a new miniseries based on The Shining came out that Stephen King had complete creative control over. So I feel like that's my next one that I've got to see because he seems happy with that one. So I know there's so much to see.
Well, hopefully it's good being that, he had control over it. So I guess that's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yep. You got to hope.
So what else is on your reading list right now?
Well, a friend just recommended to me Kit Roca's Beyond series. And so I just read the first one and wow, it was good. It was dark and it was hot and I was pretty impressed. So I think I'm going to read on there. Have you read any of her stuff?
No, I haven't. Actually, I haven't heard of her before. So what type of author is she? What's her genre?
It's romance, and it's hard to classify. I would say like futuristic, dystopian, pretty erotic, pretty dark. And she's actually a writing team. Kit Roca's a pen name, and there's 2 women who write as Kit Roca, and I can't remember who they are.
Oh.
But a friend did recommend it to me because she's another writer, and we were talking about our next projects, and the next thing I'm going to tackle, I think, is going to be a little bit more futuristic and a little bit darker and a little bit sexier, and she was like, oh, you got to read Kit Roca. So I was not disappointed.
All right, I'll have to put her down as a possible TBR option. We have those never-ending TBR lists.
Oh, gosh, I know.
Are you reading anything else right now, or is that about it?
No, that's pretty much what I've got going on.
So what books or authors would you say have, I guess, influenced your writing style, or maybe have, I guess, in the back of your mind, you just aspire to write like them because you love their writing so much? Do you have any of those authors?
Oh my gosh, so many. I think every author has writers that she reads that she loves and would love to be like, but you can't read them when you're writing because it's demoralizing. You read this perfect book and you think, oh, I'm nowhere close. I got to stop reading this or I'm not going to be able to write anymore. So for me, the readers or the writers that I love, have always loved to read, are probably like my holy trinity is Nora Roberts, Jennifer Cruzy, and Susan Elizabeth Phillips. They're like the queens of contemporary romance with kind of a charming, funny edge. They're stylish. They're always dependable. And I've never picked one up and been disappointed. In more recent years, I have fallen in love with Kristen Higgins. What I love about them is this really deft blend of being charming and funny and also not skimping on the emotion. Like they really go for it. You get a good laugh and a good cry along with this really funny, charming, easy to turn the pages kind of experience. So those are my favorites.
Awesome. So that's kind of cool that, I guess the authors that you feel that, you like their writing, you like their style are also your favorites as well. Because sometimes those don't go hand in hand.
I know. It's funny, isn't it? How you can have such a different experience as a reader and as a writer. So I really admire what those women have been able to do with their careers. And I love the experience that they give me as a reader. So that's always exciting.
Yeah. So I was looking at your profile on Goodreads, and I see that you have several books published. How many books do you have published right now?
We were just trying to figure that out the other day. And I think this one that I am working on right now, I should have it out by the end of the month, fingers crossed. I think that will be number 10 that I have published. But the sticky part is, of those 10 books, one of them is a novella. The rest are full-length romance novels, but one is a novella, and we can't figure out how to count it. Is it like a half a book? Does it count as a full book? I can say I've got 10 titles published, but sometimes I feel a little bit fraudulent saying I've got 10 books out when one of them is only like 20,000 words.
Okay. Well, I say 0.5. That's good.
Okay, we'll give it 9.5 then as soon as this one comes out.
Yeah, awesome. So can you share with us a little bit about what made you want to start writing? Because you weren't always a writer. You were something else in your career.
Yes, absolutely. I think most people have been something else when they are writers because, writing just seems like such a far-fetched fantasy. It's not like people who grow up and become writers. And if they are, they're not people that we know. They're special people. Who are really, really incredibly talented, and they are probably famous, and we don't know them. But I'm just like every other super reader, I think. It's that ever since I learned how to read, I have been face first in a book. And I remember always getting to the end of my books and looking at the very back page with the author picture and the little blurb about the author, and just thinking, oh man, wouldn't that be awesome if one day that was my picture there and my little bio? But, no one ever tells you can do that for a living. And so I kind of set it aside and I went to college like everybody does. And I listened to my college counselors and I got a degree in English because, again, stories, it's what I love. And it's really the only thing I'm good at. But I got a teaching certificate and ended up doing environmental and outdoor education for a couple of years, and then kind of jumping over into software training, and then jumping from that into, I think I have an MBA that I squeezed in there, and then I jumped over into being a compensation analyst, and then I had a baby, and I decided to stay home with her. She's 14 now, by the way, so this was a while ago, but while I decided to stay home, she was one of those a not easy baby. And so I was pretty much awake 24 hours a day, just nursing and holding this really tough baby. And I would just get stacks of books from the library, romance novels, because when you're that sleep deprived and you're that tired, you need a happy ending. You need to know that everything's going to be okay. So I just read stacks and stacks of paperback romance novels from the library. And by the time I kind of surfaced from that really first difficult 6 to 9 months, I had a story in my head, and I thought, when you read that many books, not all of them are good. And you think, if this got published, I think I could probably write something good enough to get published.
Yeah.
So then you sit down and you try, right? And then you learn how hard it is. And, and you write a couple 100,000 words that are so bad they'll never see the light of day. But if you learn that you love it, then you're completely addicted and there's no stopping you. And next thing you know, you're a stay-at-home mom with 9.5 books published.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's very cool because, a lot of people that want to make that transition and, take the step into writing, they never can get the first book done,
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
It's hard.
It's very hard. And you wouldn't even believe how many people, like just addicted readers, super readers, will come up to me and they'll say, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to write a book, but or I have an idea for a book, but I just never sat down to make it happen. And I honestly think that is the difference between people who want to write a book and people who do write a book. It's not that we have any more talent. It's not that we have any more stories in our heads. It's just that something about putting those words down on the page is addictive. And if you are susceptible to that particular addiction, it doesn't matter if you're good or not. You just keep doing it.
Right.
And if you keep doing it long enough, you get better and you build those skills. So it's not that I have stories to tell. It's that something about the act of writing feels really good to me, even when it's hard. So the people who are writers, maybe we're gluttons for punishment. I don't know, because getting that first draft out isn't fun and it's not magical and it doesn't feel easy. But something about shaping those words into a real live story that other people read is really, really cool. And if you have the talent for that kind of repetitive self-punishment, you're in. You got a career.
That's awesome. Well, you know what? I guess I don't because I am a reader, not a writer.
And that is a really great skill as well. You need stories. I think we as humans are hardwired to not just appreciate stories, but to crave them. Like that's how we make sense of our world. So I think reading is the most important thing human beings can do. Except maybe eating, breathing. I don't know. I could be overstating that.
Yeah, well, that's important as well. But I love, I am very passionate about books and audiobooks, and that is why I enjoy interviewing authors. I like to kind of get a peek behind the closet, the wall or the screen or whatever. And I know, my listeners like that as well, because not every, people have said this to me, well, why don't you write a book? You write really well. I'm like, yes, I do write really well on a blog, but that doesn't mean I want to write a book. Just because I read a million of them doesn't mean I want to write one. And that's something that I think that is okay. You can just be a reader. You don't have to be a reader, want to be writer.
Oh, no, I 100% agree. Yeah. Like, for example, I have a teaching certificate. So I have, and I've taught for several years. And so I have some skills. And every now and again, I bust them out and I dust them off and I present a class or I, teach Sunday school or something. And inevitably someone will say, oh my gosh, you're good at this. You should be a teacher. And I have to say, out of respect to teachers, a lot of people have those skills, but if you're not passionate about it and you don't love it, you're not a teacher.
Right.
And you'd be doing a disservice to those kids if you decided to be a teacher just because you can, and if you don't love it, if it's not your passion.
Exactly. So, I hear you on that because I think I would be a horrible teacher, although I'm good at training, but I don't have the patience. So yes, hats off to teachers. Right?
I know. I'm a terrible teacher. I mean, I have the skills. I can do it, but I would be a terrible teacher long term. So respect to the teachers.
Indeed. So let's talk about your trilogy today. We are here to talk about a Devil's Kettle romance trilogy.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about this trilogy. I don't know. Let's tell the audience without giving too many spoilers.
Right. So I'm not from Minnesota. That's where I live now. I am from Michigan, actually. I grew up in southeastern Michigan, and that is my home. But after, traveling the world a little bit, I ended up settling in Minnesota, which is important because being from Michigan, I'm a Great Lakes girl, right? And Minnesota has a Great Lake. We've got the shores of Superior, and it's mostly the North Shore in Minnesota. So there's this little stretch of what we call the Arrowhead, which is in northeastern Minnesota, that runs from Duluth up to the Canadian border, and it is one of the most beautiful stretches of the Great Lakes that I have ever seen, and I fell in love with it the first time I saw it, and visited at least once a year. So somewhere up on the North Shore, maybe, let's say an hour south of the Canadian border, is Judge C. Magny State Park. And in that state park, there is Devil's Kettle. It's a real thing. So, and this is fascinating. It is a hole in the ground the Brule River comes down from the north and it splits in half, and half of it goes shooting out to Lake Superior, just like follows the downhill and joins the big lake. The other half falls into this hole and disappears. And nobody knows where it goes or what it does. Scientists have studied it. They've recently decided they think they know where it goes, but they don't know for sure. So this is fascinating, right? So like as a writer, you can't look at that and not think, I wonder what would happen if something fell in there that you needed.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, that clearly there's a story here, right? So it was kind of bubbling in my head for a while. And I was on the back burner. And so I finished up a project and decided, all right, I think I need to write about this. So I created a fictional town based on Grand Marais, which is probably the nearest town to Devil's Kettle, on the north shore of Lake Superior. It's a really artsy little town. It's got this really cool kind of history of fisher folk and loggers and immigrants, and now it's a beautiful tourist town that gets by on its reputation for fostering artists. So I created this family full of artists and this town and this scandal, and I built the whole thing around a disappearing waterfall. So I have now this small town romance trilogy based on the Davis family and their artistic and dramatic children who have created all kinds of small town drama that needs to get sorted out. Right.
Well, okay, that sounds interesting. So the 3 books, though, so you mentioned the Davis family.
Yeah.
Is that how the 3 books are connected through the men in the family, or is it connected through the women? How do they all, touch each other?
That's such an interesting question, because I conceived this trilogy as more of a women's fiction bent. So I always write romance novels. Every story is a self-contained story of a couple's journey from disconnected and relatively unhappy or unstable in their lives to being happy and stable and together. So I conceived this trilogy as women's fiction in that it is a story about 3 women and their friendship. They kind of, like, my tagline is something like, they start out as they're strangers at best and enemies at worst, and by the time it's all said and done, they'll be sisters. So it is their story, these 3 women, and what connects these 3 women, though, is one son from the Davis family. His name is Diego Davis, and he is an artistic genius. But by the time the first book starts, he's already dead. He was one of those live fast, die young types who kind of blazed bright and burned out too fast. I kind of pictured him as like a Heath Ledger type, like he's incredibly talented, but not a lot of self-preservation, some addiction issues, gone too soon. So the 3 women in this trilogy, in book 1, we focus on his widow, Addison Davis. And he kind of swept her off her feet, and their marriage was difficult and kind of doomed, and he widowed her like less than a year into their marriage. So the book picks up like 3 years after his death, and Addison is still at home in Devil's Kettle in this tiny little town, and she's kind of taken his family as her own. But she doesn't know that her brother-in-law, Diego's older brother, the dependable, stoic older brother, is in love with her and has been since the minute he saw her. Right. So they've got to kind of
uncomfortable.
work that out. A little uncomfortable, right? Because this town, like I said, is very artsy, and it makes its living, the town's survival, depends on the fact that Diego Davis's artwork in the Davis Family Gallery features this genius's artwork. And so her role as his widow and his muse means that even though he's gone, her identity and her place in the town is still really wrapped up in being Diego's wife. So it'd be very difficult for her to move along and to fall in love with anybody else, let alone his black sheep brother. So that's book 1.
That sounds interesting.
Right.
So you mentioned like women's fiction, but is it kind of contemporary romance as well?
It's contemporary romance, and the reason that I feel like it branches out or rides the line towards women's fiction is because really the difference between contemporary romance and women's fiction is that romance tends to have a tighter focus on the relationship and the hero and the heroine and their story, period. It's a tighter focus. Whereas women's fiction tends to broaden that focus out and bring in a bigger cast of characters, more family issues, to broaden the focus to more of the woman's whole life, her relationships with her parents and her children and the rest of the people in the town that she lives in, her career. And because the family and the town plays such a huge role in this trilogy, I feel like if I marketed it as just contemporary romance, people who want a romance novel and want that tight focus and want to just hear about the hero and the heroine and their relationship would feel cheated. They'd feel like I didn't tell them the truth about what this book is. So I like to be honest with my readers and let them know that the focus is a little broader on this one. You're going to hear more about these women's lives and their families and their careers and their concerns and their pasts and their histories.
Yeah. So does Addie and Jackson, I think that's his name, is their relationship pretty much secondary to the story?
No, I think their relationship, the romance, resolving their that tension between them, getting past the fronts that they keep up to their authentic selves, which is really the journey of the story. That is what the story is about. But getting from who they think they have to be to who they authentically are and being those people and being together and in love, it affects those changes that they need to make. It affects all of the other people in their lives, and it affects the entire town. So it's a bigger story than a traditional romance novel. Okay. But the focus of the story, the heart of the story, is their love story. Kind of finding the courage to let go of what they think their role is and embrace who they want to be, and kind of letting the chips fall where they may when they reach for this new thing.
Right. Well, I always ask this subjective question when I talk to people who are writing romance in any, subgenre of romance. So since there is a love interest or a love story underneath it all, I'm going to ask you the same thing. So sure. What's the heat level in your opinion? And again, I know it's a subjective thing. One person may think kissing is X-rated and the next person will think it's not. But, right. In your own opinion, do you think, on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm using the scale of like 1 being Christian fiction and 10 being erotica, how do you think that the romance in your stories falls?
That is such a good question, because I've been at this for 13, 14 years. My first published book came out in 2010. So, and that first book was reviewed in Romantic Times, and they said it was hot, because their scale goes from like mild to hot to like super hot or something like that. So, or maybe it was, they said it was hot. So it was on a scale of like 1 to 4 little fires, right? It got like 3. So I've never written anything even close to erotica, but I write books with fully realized love scenes. So you do get the description all the way through to the end, but I use euphemisms. It's not dirty. I'm not ashamed to have my mother or even my father-in-law read these books. But let me think about this. My second published book came out in 2011, and I think the next one, my first self-published book, was 2012, and that one also was reviewed in RT. And by that time, and I think I've been consistent. I have written pretty much the same heat level my entire career. You kind of find out where your comfort zone is. You kind of stick with it. Yeah. And some people are able to modify that, and they're like, oh, the market's going hotter. I'm going to write hotter. Or, I'm going to write Amish fiction now, and really mild. But I've never been able to do that. The story that I want to write kind of comes with this heat level. So anyway, by the time that RT reviewed another book of mine 3 years later, they classified it as mild.
Okay. So
I think I have stayed pretty much the same, and I think the whole industry has moved hotter. And that's not a surprise. If you go to conferences, if you go to writers' workshops and stuff, they'll just keep telling you hot sells, hotter and shorter, hotter and shorter. If you can write little erotic shorts, you're going to make $1 million. And unfortunately, I have never been the kind of writer who can write fast enough or write flexibly enough to chase a market. I pretty much write what I write, and that's what I love to write. And I am not super able to chase trends. So I would say between like a 1 and a 10, I might write a 6. Like maybe a little on the hotter side of right in the middle.
I'm going to assume you mean kind of like really romantic and sweet open door, right? Like nothing is crazy.
No, I'm not writing. Like, to be fair though, like my last finished trilogy was the Trouble trilogy, the Blake Brothers books. And the middle book of that one, the hero is a pretty dark guy. He's been through some stuff. He's got himself some issues. And so I kind of think those sex scenes were a little hotter than I normally write, just because he was a darker villain. He was a darker hero. He had some issues on board, and he liked things a little rougher and a little hotter. So just because I was writing that guy, the sex scenes were a little bit hotter.
Yeah.
But still nothing that would qualify as erotica. Nothing that, I don't know, that I wouldn't happily own in public.
Okay.
So if you've read Jenny Cruzy or Susan Elizabeth Phillips, I'm pretty much right in line with that.
Okay, great. Thank you for saying that, because that was my next question. Who would enjoy this series? And so that answers that question great.
Yeah.
Obviously, since we're talking about three friends who, deal with this family, do you need to read this series in order, or can you kind of jump around?
You know what? This is my first true trilogy, so I would definitely recommend reading them in order. And by true trilogy, I mean, like, my last series of books, I did call them a trilogy because there's three of them. Well, 3.5, right? I talked about that novella, sticks right in there between 2 and 3. But those are connected books in that you can read them in any order. I think it's more fun to read them in order because you get like little cameos from people who were in other books. But the plots of those are completely independent from one another. You don't need to read book 1 to understand what happens in book 3. Whereas this book, the Devil's Kettle trilogy, this is the first time I've done this. It was a challenge to me as a writer. I ask a story question in book 1, and I don't answer it until book 3. I resolve some of it in each book, but there was a family scandal in the Davis family that has to do with Diego Davis, this wild artist who just caused all kinds of trouble. And then it happened like 20 years before the first book, well, maybe 15 years, 14 years before the first book starts. And it involves a child, and that child's parentage is in question. It doesn't, people don't really know. Like, it's kind of like a mystery baby, which is like a romance trope, a beloved romance trope. There is a baby. Who's the mother? Who's the father? So that's the story question that is asked in book 1. Whose child is this? And it all has to do with this huge scandal that happened like 15 years ago surrounding this artist who is now passed away. But the things he did, he kind of left this legacy behind him, and everyone is trying to cope with the damage that he did. Yeah. So there are the 3 women who each get their own book. Addison is his widow. She gets book 1. Willa is a woman from his past a relationship he had in his past, and she gets book 2. And Georgie is his sister, and she gets book 3. And all 3 of these women are involved in this scandal somehow. And each of them resolves part of the mystery, but you don't get the answers until the last book. So I would recommend reading them in order so that you do spoilers on yourself. Because if you read book 2 before book 1, you're going to be like, oh, well, there goes the surprise for book 1.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, you guys, there is an excerpt for book 1 in the blog post. You'll find the link below in the show notes. So if you want to get a little sneak peek of book 1, definitely go over to the blog and check that out. And also we have buy links in the show notes as well. So if you'd like to check out Susan's books, you can just clickety-click and there you go.
And if anyone happens to be going to the Rust City Book Con, I am giving away a few copies of Picture Me and You, book 1 of the Devil's Kettle series. So you should come find us, and maybe you'll get a chance to take one of those books home.
Ooh, yes. Okay. Everyone loves books. Yes.
Right?
Okay.
Free books especially, because those are the best kind.
Yes, they are. So tell us, what are you working on right now, like your immediate future projects?
Well, right now I'm working really hard on copy editing book 3, Remember Me and You, because I would really like to have that out by the end of July so that by the time I get to the Rust City Book Con, the entire trilogy will be available and people can just binge read it, because you know how much people love to binge read. But my next project, I've been kind of percolating in the back of my mind for a long time, and I'm still kind of trying to get my arms around it, but it's going to be the biggest project I've ever taken on. The biggest thing I've ever done so far is a trilogy like this one that I'm just finishing up now with the three connected books that, the story arc goes through all three books. And that was a pretty big challenge. But this next thing I'm thinking about is going to be a 9-book arc.
Ooh.
Right? And
Yeah.
many of my books flirt around the edges of some magic. It's kind of a theme that runs through my books. And some people really like it and some people don't. They just want their romance straight up. But I've always kind of had this fascination with the paranormal and just little bits of magic, a little bit the way Nora Roberts does. If you're a Nora Roberts fan, she often has a little bit of magic in her books. And
so kind of magical realism a little bit or is it kind of like mysterious magic where it's kind of, no one knows?
It's, like I said, I'm still trying to get my arms around it, but I think this is going to be straight up magic. I think it's going to be set in an alternative world in which either there's been like a dystopian future where there's been some kind of calamity and the world has changed, or maybe it'll just be a fantasy land, like an alternate reality. But in this alternate reality, people live much closer to nature and magic is much closer to the surface. The veil between us and these powers and forces is much thinner. And so it's a little more permeable. It's easier to reach through, and the powers that be on the other side have an easier time reaching through to us. And so people are more open to the idea of magic that happens in the world. So, and also the world is a lot harder to live in because we don't have the technology that we have now. So I'm kind of backing things up.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I mean, you probably don't know this, but like fantasy, urban fantasy, anything that falls in that wheelhouse, like magic, all of that, I just love it. So I am definitely interested to hear as you get closer to realizing what this next project is. I would love to hear more about it because I just love that stuff. Love it, love it. So definitely that will be on my radar.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to get my arms around it because this will be the first time I've kind of just let go of the reins and let the magic take the wheel. So we're going to see what happens.
Awesome. Okay, so is there anything else that you would like to share about A Devil's Kettle romance trilogy before we talk a little bit about Rust City?
Oh, just that I'm really excited that third book is finally coming out. You know how as a writer, you're either a plotter or a pantser, they call it. Like you either know everything that's happening and you write to an extensive outline, or you just kind of let it roll and you see what happens. Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of split the difference there, and sometimes I know what's happening and sometimes I kind of don't. And what happens there is that I kind of painted myself into a corner. And by the time you get to the third book, right, like you've committed to some stuff. You've put stuff on the page. Those books are published, 1 and 2, and you just have to live with what's in them. And to make a really long story short, book 3 of this trilogy, the one I'm finishing up right now, the hero is he used to be a business mogul, and now he is a sheep farmer.
Oh.
Right. That's unusual, right? That's not what he saw coming either. And it is not what I as an author saw coming, but I committed to a few details foolishly. And next thing I knew, I was like, oh, he's going to have to run a sheep farm. Darn it. Oh. So this book, I've learned a lot about sheep. And this book took me a lot of places I did not expect to go. But I have to say, I have written, like I said, like 9.5 books. And this book, Remember Me and You, contains some of my favorite scenes that I've ever written. And they have to do with sheep, which is as big a surprise to me as it was to my hero, and as it probably is to you. So I would encourage people to check that one out because I think it's going to be a really fun ride.
Oh, very cool. Sounds fun.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Rust City, since that is kind of what brought us together today.
Sure.
So you mentioned earlier you'll be giving away a couple of books, which is very cool. But since you have so many books, what will you be bringing to the signing? Will you have a bunch or just this series, or what will you be doing?
Well, I know that people like to start at the beginning, and I know that I'm very likely a new-to-you author, no matter who you are, because I've not had a huge career. So I'm going to be bringing a few print copies and several more e-copies of the first book in both of my completed trilogies. So my Trouble trilogy, also known as the Blake Brothers book, the first book there is called Taste of Trouble. And that one just went perma-free. So it is, if you have Kindle or Nook or iBooks or Kobo, it's free now. You can just grab it whenever. But I will also have some little download codes so that you can grab it whenever. So I'll have that one with me. And I will have Picture Me and You, the first book of the Devil's Kettle series. I'll have some print copies and some download codes for that one because I think people like to start at the beginning and I'd like to get them going.
So you mentioned earlier you are from Michigan. So are you familiar with the area where Rust City is going to be taking place?
I am. I was born in Royal Oak. I moved to Troy for a couple of years. And then by the time I was 6, I was out in Romeo, Michigan. And my parents still live in the house where I grew up. So this is kind of my old stomping grounds.
Oh, very cool. That's like, honestly, Troy is 20 minutes from me. So I'm always in Troy for book club. The restaurants there are awesome. So very cool.
And it's grown up a ton since I lived there. Every time I come home, I can't believe how big it's gotten.
Yeah, it's like a lot. I mean, that main corridor of Big Beaver, it's off the chain with so much stuff over there. Restaurants and stores and schools and hospitals. And it's grown massively.
It really has.
Yeah. So what are you most looking forward to during Rust City?
Oh, so many things. First of all, I have a group of ladies that I have been, we used to blog together and we kind of let the daily blogging go, but the site is still up, where we were the Romance Bandits, and there were 20 of us, and we were all Golden Heart finalists. So the Romance Writers of America has their version of the Oscars every year, and unpublished writers would compete for the Golden Heart, and published authors would compete for a Rita. And being a Golden Heart finalist was like being a princess. It was so much fun. You'd go to parties, and at the very last day of the conference, we would have a big party with like black tie, ball gowns, and they would have, a ceremony where they would read the nominees, and they'd announce the winner. You'd get to go up on stage and make a speech. And so in 2006, the Romance Bandits, these ladies, we were part of the class of finalists for the Golden Heart Award, and we ended up blogging together for probably 5 years. And occasionally we'll still post something, but there are a handful of those ladies, Karen Crane and Donna McMeans and Nancy Northcott and myself, who will all be at Rust City, and it's been forever since I've seen them, so I'm so looking forward to seeing my Romance Bandits. And also, I'm looking forward to seeing my family and being home again. It's always exciting to go back to where I'm from and to spend time with the people that I love, and to throw a book conference on top of all of it. I mean, it's like icing on the cake. Yeah.
So are you bracketing the weekend and spending a couple more days?
I am. My one of my sisters lives like right over in Rochester Hills, and she is having her 10th anniversary. And so I am going to double down and be like Auntie of the Year and watch her kids while she and her husband take a vacation right after the conference.
Oh, look at you being all nice and being the best aunt ever. Yes.
I know. It's exciting. That's what aunties are for, though, right? That's what we love up the babies.
Yeah, it is, because I'm an aunt as well. I don't have any of my own kids, so I'm always, whenever I can step in and help, that's my pleasure to do so.
It's great. I know. And I live far away from these nieces, and so having this time with them, just being close like that, it's really important to me.
Yeah, I believe that. Absolutely. Okay, so one more thing about Rust City. So the panels, did you already sign up for your panels and stuff?
You know what? I'm not sure, honestly. I've been traveling this summer, and I've been taking things like one commitment at a time. You know how you have to do that sometimes. You're like, okay, I'm going to think about that as soon as I get through this. So the only thing I know for sure that I'm doing is I believe on Saturday night I'm participating in the Carnival of Romance, which is the Romance Bandits that I told you about, plus a handful of other authors. We're all getting together and we're putting on a little thing where people play carnival games, and we're giving away books as our prizes. And I think we're giving away a Kindle Fire as like the big prize of the night. So that's going to be super exciting.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, guys, tickets I think are still available. So you might want to run over and get tickets so you can participate in this and enter to win some stuff. So that's cool. Fun. Yeah, absolutely. So outside of Rust City, or, after Rust City, can readers find you at any other events, for the remainder of the year?
I don't think I'm signed up to do any other conferences or book signings or anything like that, but I'm always happy to talk to book clubs or readers groups or whatever. I've done that a couple of times via Skype, and it's been super fun. So all of my information, my contact info is on my webpage, or you can find me on Facebook or Twitter. And I just love talking to readers groups. So feel free to hit me up if you want to have me chat with your book club.
Awesome. Very cool. That's really nice. I like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like a book club girl. I have so many book clubs. So I think that's really cool when authors like doing that.
I just love when readers want to read my book and talk to me about it. That's like day making stuff right there.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yes, I know. Okay. Okay. So we have reached the end, and it is time for the lightning round. Are you ready for the lightning round?
I don't know. I'm nervous. Is it going to be hard?
No, it's going to be easy. It's so cool. Okay, so it's 60 seconds, 60 questions. Some are book-related questions, some are not. The only rule I have is that if I ask you a question that's an A or B question, you have to choose one. You can't say neither, and you can't say both.
No third alternative?
No third alternative. You have to choose.
Okay, I will try.
Okay, so I'm going to set my timer so I don't go over. And are you ready?
I think so. I'm ready.
Okay. Physical books or ebooks?
Ebooks.
Hero or villain?
Villain.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Name a book that you've read in one sitting.
Welcome to Temptation by Jenny Cruzy.
Beer or wine?
Oh, that's a hard one to have to choose. Beer.
Name a book that you faked read.
Oh, cripes. War and Peace. I tried so hard.
Milk chocolate or dark chocolate?
Dark.
Where's your favorite place to read?
Oh, I have a hammock chair in my sun porch that I'll fight you for.
Oh, dogs or cats?
Cats. Dogs bite me.
Cake or pie?
Oh, pie.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Android or Apple?
Apple.
Ooh, Apple. Boo. Name your favorite food.
Pizza.
Marvel or DC?
Marvel.
Popcorn or chips?
Popcorn.
Romance or erotica?
Romance.
Audiobook or bookish podcast?
Oh, bookish podcast.
Good answer. And we are done.
Oh, awesome. That was not as hard as I thought it would be, except for that beer wine thing. That one threw me.
That's easy for me. It's going to be wine every time.
I was very close to that, because if it was like beer, wine versus cocktails, I'd go beer, wine every time. But choosing between them is like picking a child.
Yeah. Oh, it is kind of, if you love them both, it is going to be like that. Yeah. But, there is a favorite child. I don't care what anyone says. There is.
Okay, you're right. When pressed, you will pick. I'm not. Yes. I'm ashamed of that, but okay. Yeah, it's true.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. Do you have any last tidbits you'd like to share before we sign off for the evening?
Oh gosh, I already admitted that I accidentally wrote a sheep book, right?
You did do that, yes.
Okay, then I think that's it. I have nothing else to confess.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time out.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this so much.
Oh, my pleasure. You guys, you will find all of Susan's links below, as I mentioned earlier, so feel free to follow her all over social media. Reach out to her if you have a book club and you would like to read her books. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, happy reading. Bye, guys. If you enjoyed today's interview and would like to show your support, there are a few things you can do. First, you can head on over to iTunes and give a positive 5-star review. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow the Shelf Addiction Podcast on Spreaker, the only place where you can listen live and get broadcast notifications so that you never miss an episode. Most importantly, you can share this podcast with friends and family that enjoy bookish topics. Thank you for listening, and I will see you soon with another author interview. Until next time, happy reading.